On the evening of July 23rd, 1998, the Ecliptic Express wound its way through the shadowed arteries of the Arkley Mountains. Owned by Umbrella and known only to a select few, the train glided over its tracks like a steel ghost, cutting through the wilderness. Inside, its passengers settled into quiet routines, unaware of the storm rising around them. High above the valley, a lone figure watched from a rocky summit, humming a distant, choir-like melody to no one but the forest. As the train passed beneath him, the mountains seemed to breathe in anticipation. Then the leeches came. A dark, living tide surged from the tree line, swarming the train, splintering glass before spilling into the cars. The attack was swift, overwhelming. Within moments, the passengers' fate were sealed. Two hours later, Bravo Team cut across the same mountain range, flying low beneath the clouds. As part of S.T.A.R.S, their assignment was to investigate a string of grisly murders and strange animal attacks that had turned the region into a piece of whispered fear. The night was unnervingly still as their helicopter traversed the forest canopy. That was until the engine spurred, coughed, and failed. The crash was violent, but survivable. Shaken, the team gathered themselves amid the wreckage while their pilot, Kevin Dooley, remained behind to assess the damage. With no time to waste, the remaining members pushed into the woods, guided only by the mission and the oppressive silence clinging to the mountains. They found the wrecked Marine MP vehicle, not far from the crash site. Its frame was twisted, the ground scarred by skid marks and impact. Inside, the drivers lay dead, lifeless testimonies to a sudden and brutal attack. The prisoner they had been transporting, Marine Second Lieutenant Billy Cohen, was nowhere to be found. The absence felt deliberate, unsettling. Given the bodies, the circumstances, and the fading trail in the dirt, Captain Enrico Marini reached a single, unavoidable conclusion. Cohen had killed his guards and fled into the forest. With the night closing in and danger already written in the landscape, Bravo Team spread out through the Arkley wilderness to hunt for the escaped prisoner, unaware of a far greater horror waiting in the dark. Rebecca Chambers moved swiftly through the undergrowth of the Raccoon Forest, her eyes adjusting to the shifting shadows beneath the towering pines. She was Bravo Team's medic, the youngest of them, and the night pressed heavily around her as she followed faint tracks through the brush. Then through the trees, a pale shape emerged. An idle train, its steel frame looming like a stranded beast. The sounds around it felt unnatural. She climbed aboard to investigate. The air inside was stale, laced with the metallic scent of blood. Seats lay overturned, belongings scattered and abandoned. Dark smears trailed along the cushions, evidence of sudden violence. As she moved deeper into the carriage, a man slumped in one of the seats moved. His head lifted slowly, eyes dull and clouded, as if waking from a dream he shouldn't have survived. More figures soon rose from the shadows, passengers who should have been dead. Their bodies moved with a slow, dreadful purpose. Rebecca retreated through the narrow aisle, slipping past grasping hands and staggering limbs until she reached the front cars. There she found him, Billy Cohen. The escaped Marine prisoner stood behind her path of retreat, a handgun drawn, unwilling to submit. His posture held the tension of a man who trusted no one, especially not a uniformed stranger. Before either could react further, the train's window shattered. Edward Dewey, one of the Bravo Team's own, crashed through the glass and collapsed at Rebecca's feet. Blood marked his uniform. His breathing was ragged. His final moments of consciousness were haunted by the creatures that had attacked him. Figures he described only as dead men and monsters. Moments later, the forest seemed to erupt with snarling shapes as zombie dogs burst from the darkness, pursuing him. Rebecca's radio cracked faintly. Captain Marini relayed new information from the crash site. Records indicating Billy Cohen had been sentenced to death for murdering 23 people and was being transferred to a psychiatric hospital before he escaped. Rebecca pressed deeper into the upper level of the train. The dining car lay eerily pristine, a quiet pocket untouched by the carnage. But the illusion shattered when she encountered a lone man standing there. When she approached, his form dissolved, his skin collapsed, and his features melted. A mass of leeches burst from within him, creatures that had been only mimicking human shape. They swarmed towards her, a living tide hungry for warmth. Billy intervened, Together they fought the leech-like mass until the creature dissolved into nothingness. In that moment, distrust softened. It was replaced by a fragile reliance, born of necessity. The pair glimpsed a figure high on the mountainside, surrounded by a riding halo of leeches. The man stood untouched, singing softly into the night, a strange, haunting melody that carried across the forest. Deep within the night-shrouded mountains, the Ecliptic Express shuddered. An unexpected jolt that rippled through its abandoned corridors. Rebecca and Billy felt the floor tremble beneath their feet as the train lurched forward. Somewhere outside, unseen operators had activated the controls. Far ahead, the Umbrella Security Service, Delta Team, had boarded the train under orders issued by Albert Wesker and William Birkin. Their mission was simple: secure the locomotive and deliver it for investigation into the bizarre attack that had halted it earlier that night. But Umbrella's plans dissolved the moment they encountered the true nature of the threat. The leeches started pouring through the cracks and vents, swarming the soldiers before they could react. The men of Delta Team fell quickly. Their bodies were overtaken, and their minds were dragged into the same deathly trance as the passengers before them. The Ecliptic Express barreled deeper into the mountain pass. The landscape blurred beyond the windows as speed increased. The train hurtled down its tracks like a runaway beast. Rebecca and Billy, trapped aboard, realized the danger. A derailment was inevitable. Working together, they raced through the cars, manipulating the braking systems from the front and the rear. An act made all the more harrowing when they were forced to confront the reanimated corpse of Edward Dewey. His death came a second time beneath the weight of their survival. The brakes engaged, the train groaned, shuddering violently as sparks lit the rails, but the momentum was too great. Metal screamed as the Ecliptic Express tore past the edge of a cliff, crashing through barriers and plunging into the underground station, hidden beneath the mountain. The wreckage scattered across stone and steel as the train finally derailed, settling in a twisted ruin of its former elegance. Billy and Rebecca crawled from the shattered wreckage of the derailed train, the metallic groan of the cooling steel echoing through the underground cavern. Dust drifted around them like ash from a long-dead fire. Ahead, beyond the splintered debris and broken rail lines, an old complex rose out of the darkness, massive and unmistakably abandoned. They stepped into its shadow and found themselves in what remained of an Umbrella Pharmaceuticals training school. Time had hollowed the place, leaving behind crumbling walls, silent corridors, and the sense that the building itself was holding its breath. Faded banners and rusted plaques hinted at a place once meant for instruction and discipline. As they moved deeper into the facility, the truth began to reveal itself in scattered documents, sealed laboratories, and abandoned equipment. The training school was more than a place to groom Umbrella's future executives. It had also served as a hidden cradle for early biological weapons research. Much of the evidence pointed to a single figure, Dr. James Marcus, one of Umbrella's founders, school director, a pioneer whose brilliance had helped forge the corporation's foundation, and whose obsession with the progenitor virus had long since carried him into forbidden territory. Each clue, each forgotten note, painted a picture of experiments that blurred the boundary between science and monstrosity. Marcus had transformed the academy into a secret testing ground, its students and staff unaware how deep the research tunnels ran beneath their feet. Billy and Rebecca pressed on, the weight of the discovery settling over them. As Billy and Rebecca pressed deeper into the abandoned training school, the shadows grew longer and the air grew colder. The building's elegant architecture, once meant to inspire and discipline Umbrella's brightest young recruits, now concealed something far more sinister. Files lay scattered across the classrooms and offices, fragmented records from the 1970s that hinted at the truth behind the institution's creation. The students had once walked these halls with ambition and promise, had not been trainees at all. They had been subjects. Dr. James Marcus has seen them not as children, but as raw material for his experiments. Laboratory reports detailed unauthorized trials conducted beneath the school. Subjects exposed to viral strains show progressive behavioral change, organ failure, and aggressive reanimation. The transformation into undead had been intentional, engineered through repeating infection cycles. The basement confirmed everything. A 2-level chamber stretched beneath the academy, its concrete walls stained with dry blood. Shackles still hung from metal hooks, Every surface bore the marks of prolonged suffering. The room felt haunted, as though the walls themselves remembered the screams. Some of the creatures wandering the school wore tattered remains of old uniforms, students who had been infected and left to decay over 2 decades. Their bodies had withered, but the virus preserved their movement, trapping them in a perpetual state of unfinished death. Birkin's investigation team had come here only weeks earlier. Umbrella's security service operatives, sent to prepare the facility for reopening. Their corpses now shuffled through the corridors, twisted by the same infection that claimed Marcus's victims. Equipment cases and broken communication devices lay where they had fallen, a silent testimony to a mission that ended the moment they entered Marcus's labyrinth. The training school is no longer an institution. It had become a grotesque archive, one documenting the evolution of Umbrella's cruelty, from the earliest days of the progenitor virus to the corporate recklessness that persisted 20 years later. As Billy and Rebecca navigated the hallways, the weight of these revelations pressed down on them. The horrors of Arkley had roots stretching deeper than they realized, planting decades before either of them had ever arrived. Deeper within the training school, the truth widening into something far more treacherous than experiments on children. Billy and Rebecca uncovered fragments of internal correspondence, torn memos, and half-burned files. It revealed a cold, calculating power struggle at the heart of Umbrella's origins. The documents pointed to a bitter dispute between Dr. Marcus and Umbrella's CEO, Oswald E. Spencer. But Spencer coveted more than shared credit. He wanted Marcus's breakthroughs, his mastery of the progenitor virus, the foundation of everything Umbrella had built. The more Rebecca and Billy pieced together, the clearer it became that Marcus's disappearance decades earlier had not been a mystery, only a cover-up. Far above them, the mysterious man, the one they had seen bathed in moonlight, singing on the mountainside, watched their progress through the facility's aging CCTV system. He followed Rebecca's movements from monitor to monitor, and then, with a small gesture, he said something loose. The Eliminators. As they descended to the lower levels, their claws echoed against the metal corridors like sharp, rhythmic warnings. One found Rebecca in the torture chamber. The creature emerged from the darkness, launching itself through the air, its claws clamped into her arm, teeth sinking deep before she could break away. The impact drove her backward, the ancient flooring groaning beneath them. Decades of rot and structural decay gave way. Rebecca fell into the darkness below. Pain radiated from her wounds as she struggled to regain her footing, her breathing sharp and shallow. The Eliminator above snarled into the pit, pacing along the broken edge as dust and debris rained down. Before it could descend after her, a figure dropped into the space beside her, Billy, arriving just as her strength faltered. Together they pushed deeper into the ruins, leaving the shattered chamber and pursuing BOW behind them. As they pressed deeper into the ruined training facility, the weight of exhaustion and injury bore heavily on Rebecca. The bite throbbed beneath her sleeve, each heartbeat a dull reminder how close she had come to dying. Shadow drifted along the walls as they moved, and the silence between them grew thick, too thick for her to carry any longer. At last, she yielded to the questions that had followed Billy Cohen since she first saw his empty cell and bloody MP vehicle in the forest. The truth, once avoided, demanded to be heard. Billy, worn by memory and by the day's horrors, finally allowed the past to surface. Long before he became a fugitive, before Umbrella's nightmares swallowed the mountains, he had served as a Marine. His unit had been deployed to an African jungle, guided by flawed intelligence that promised a guerrilla stronghold. But there was no base, only a village. When his commanding officer panicked and ordered the units to open fire, Billy refused to participate. The others followed the order. That massacre that followed needed a scapegoat. Billy became the one chosen to bear the blame. The court-martial was swift, shaped more by political convenience than truth. The stains of the operation, the misconduct, the fear-driven decisions, the deaths, they were all buried beneath the false narrative. And Billy Cohen was branded a murderer of 23 people. Deep within the surveillance room of the executive training school, Albert Wesker and William Birkin stood beside a wall of flickering screens, each feed showing fragments of chaos unfolding throughout the facility. The truth settled heavily between them. Containment was no longer possible. The biohazard had already spiraled beyond control. Wesker's mind worked with cold efficiency. He understood the pattern. Umbrella was approaching collapse, its secrets rotting from within, its foundations undermined by hubris and unchecked ambition. The corporation could not survive the weight of its own experiments. To remain loyal would be to share its fate. Birkin pressed forward, unwilling to abandon his work. The G-Virus, his greatest creation, the pinnacle of biological engineering, was still incomplete. His ambition tethered him to Umbrella's dying empire, even as the facility crumbled around them. Wesker, however, had already charted his escape. He intended to use the approaching S.T.A.R.S Alpha team, manipulating their mission to the Spencer Mansion. Their struggle against Umbrella's bioweapons would prove invaluable combat data, all under the guise of a rescue operation. With that knowledge, Wesker would leave the corporation behind and forge a path of his own. Birkin, though reluctant, recognized the necessity of removing the evidence of their involvement. The executive training school, long contaminated by Marcus experiments, could not be allowed to stand. He made his decision. Birkin initiated the self-destruct sequence, sealing the fate of the training school. Alarms ignited through the halls. The building would soon collapse into fire and ruin, erasing all remaining traces of Marcus's legacy. Billy and Rebecca emerged from the wreckage of the training school into a desolate courtyard, the air thick with decay and stagnation. The path ahead led them to a dilapidated church, its once pristine structure now buckling under years of neglect. Stained glass windows sagged in warped frames, their fractured panes casting distorted patterns across the stone floor. Inside, an ancient lift waited, an elevator concealed beneath the altar. They descended into darkness. What lay beneath the church was older still, a laboratory carved into bedrock, built in the hidden era of James Marcus's earliest T-virus experiments. The facility had rotten with that time, yet its horrors persisted as though preserved by malice alone. Rebecca climbed to an auxiliary chamber above the main hall. Rows of capsules lined the walls, each filled with murky fluid that shimmered under dim overhead lights. Human shape floated within them. Teenagers, preserved at the moment of their death, their features slack and pale. Other capsules contained organs suspended like grotesque specimens. Lungs, hearts, spines, each meticulously harvested, labeled, and dated. In the adjoining operation room, the remnants of Marcus's surgical work were laid bare. Tables stained with dry blood, tools abandoned mid-procedure, their edges rusted with time. Immediately a mass of tissue lay strapped to one of the slabs, an experiment that never reached completion. The morgue beyond was overflowing, doors unable to hold the corpses stuffed into them. Body bags littered the floor, stacked without care. There were poisons, reagents, and volatile compounds Marcus had used to refine his viral mutations. Even in stillness, the room smelled of antiseptic and old death. However, that stillness did not last. The zombified members of Birkin's investigation team lunged from the corridors once again. The uniforms were torn, their bodies bearing wounds not caused by leeches alone. Bullet holes, shattered limbs, and slashed flesh testified to internal conflict, a desperate struggle that had broken out between operatives once the infection took hold. One room contained a gas chamber, its interior fogged and doors sealed. Inside, an affected man clawed weakly at the window, his transformation incomplete. Someone had activated the chamber from the outside, using it not as a containment measure, but as an execution device. Every detail spoke of panic, betrayal, and abandonment. Billy and Rebecca pressed on to the suffocating warren of corridors, Marcus's atrocities following them like shadows. At last, Billy and Rebecca reached the far end of the decaying underground complex, where a rustic cable car waited, suspended above a vast tunnel system. They prepared to board. Then, a low guttural snarl echoed through the corridor. One of Marcus's eliminators emerged from the darkness, its body tensed, its eyes fixed on them with predatory intent. The creature launched itself toward the platform, claws skidding across metal as it attacked. Rebecca dodged backward, nearly avoiding a swipe that would have torn her belly. Billy moved to intercept, drawing the creature away from her position. The Eliminator, with his training and engineer instincts, forced Billy towards the edge of the platform. The old flooring groaned beneath their struggle. Dust and stones rained down from the overhead supports. With the final surge, the illuminator lunged, forcing Billy off balance. Billy fell from the ledge, disappearing into the darkness below. Moments later, he struck the surface of an underground stream, the cold impact swallowing him in a violent current. Rebecca calmly watched as the stream carried him away into the depths of a subterranean maze. She was alone once more, surrounded by the remnants of Marcus's nightmare, with no certainty that Billy Cohen had survived the fall. Rebecca left the ruined lab behind, moving alone through the frosted slopes that stretched downhill from the training school. The Umbrella chemical plant emerged from the tree line, a sprawling industrial complex, half hidden beneath rusted catwalks and towering storage tanks. At first glance, it looked deserted, its machinery silent and its windows dark. But the signs of what had happened there were unmistakable. Leech slime streaked across the concrete, broken lights dangled from their fixtures. Whatever nightmare had consumed the Ecliptic Express and Marcus's underground lab had swept through this facility as well, leaving not a single worker in sight. Rebecca followed the abandoned halls to a massive freight elevator designed to transport materials between surface operations and Umbrella's deeper research networks. The platform carried her far below the mountain. The doors opened into Nest. This was the heart of William Birkin's bioweapons empire, a labyrinth of sterile corridors and reinforced chambers built to contain the most advanced research Umbrella had ever attempted. Yet the silence here was no comfort. The absence of personnel, alarms, or movement told its own story. Something had happened here long before she arrived. As she pushed deeper into the facility, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Enrico Marini. He looked worn from his journey, having infiltrated Nest to the concealed subway tunnel, originating near the Arkley laboratory. Confusion marked his face as he searched the empty facility. The rest of the Bravo team was nowhere to be found. The mission had fractured in ways he couldn't understand. Rebecca remained resolute. Billy was still out there. Alive or dead, she didn't know. But she couldn't abandon him. Enrico understood the futility of her hope. Yet after a long pause, he relented. The mountain was vast and time was limited. He would return to Arkley Lab alone, while she stayed to find the fugitive Marine who had become her unlikely ally. Moments after Enrico departed, a sharp mechanical hiss echoed through the hallway. Heavy footsteps reverberated against the floor. The mysterious man, ever watching, ever manipulating events, had released another of Umbrella's creations into the facility, the T-001. The prototype Tyrant, a towering, malformed iteration of the creature Umbrella USA has sought to perfect. It stepped into the corridor, its frame twisted yet formidable, its presence overwhelming. Rebecca had no time to think. The Tyrant charged her. Instinct or desperation drove her. She darted past its swings, lured it towards unstable equipment, sent sparks and debris crashing into his path. A sudden explosion from an overloaded generator rocked the chamber, slamming the prototype backward. It fell into a heap of scorched tissue and exposed muscle, its massive form rendered motionless. The echoes faded. Rebecca navigated the quiet corridors of Nest until she reached a sealed access door leading into the adjoining water treatment plant. The sound of machinery echoing faintly beneath the roar of rushing water as she stepped inside. Pipes lined the walls like steel veins, pulsing with the currents of an underground stream that wound its way through the facility. Then she saw him. Far below, carried helplessly by the churning water, Billy Cohen drifted in and out of view, pulled along by the violent current created by the plant's filtration systems. Rebecca hurried down the metal stairway, following the stream through a maze of walkways and platforms, the smell of decay thickening as she descended. And shapes began to move in the shadows. The workers, men and women who had once maintained a treatment facility, now staggered through the facility, their bodies warped by infection. Mysterious man's leeches had infiltrated the water supply, merging with the biowaste discharged from Nest. The combination had turned the workers into slow, waterlogged zombies, whose skin slopped away in damp sheets. Their clothes hung in tatters, soaked with chemicals and organic residue. Rebecca pressed on. The roar of the stream grew louder as she neared the greater platform. Well, the water finally spilled into a large drainage basin. There, washed on the decking like a piece of debris, lay Billy's unconscious body. She climbed down, knelt beside him, and helped him upright, supporting his weight as he coughed and forced air into his lungs again. As Billy regained awareness, his gaze drifted beyond Rebecca, toward the floor beneath them. The decking was covered in bones. Human skeletons lay scattered across the platform and along the lower grates, bleached by time and water. Some still clung to the remnants of clothing. Others were tangled in rusted chains, or collapsed in positions suggesting that they had been discarded without care. Billy understood immediately. These were not victims of a recent outbreak. Their decay was older, more deliberate. Whatever biological horrors had unfolded in the facility had not just been the first acts of cruelty. James Marcus had used the water systems at disposal long before Umbrella abandoned the site, dumping bodies into the underground current and allowing the stream to swallow the evidence. Billy and Rebecca pushed deeper into the water treatment plant, following narrow walkways suspended over dark channels and rust-stained machinery. The air felt heavy. Each step carried them further into the labyrinth of pipes and platforms, until the current led them into a chamber where the water seemed almost still. And then suddenly, the mysterious man stepped out of the distance, his form illuminated by the flicker of failing overhead lights, his presence radiating a terrible calm, his figure framed by a sluggish ripple of leeches scattering at his feet. He had watched them from a distance until now. At last he revealed himself. The truth came not as a sudden revelation, but as a terrible unraveling. He was not James Marcus, yet he bore Marcus's face, voice, and mannerisms. He moved with the same conviction, the same cold confidence of the virologist who founded Umbrella's darkest legacy. But the thing before them was not Marcus. The creature standing before them was the Queen Leech, created as a mutant test subject in 1988. It had been Marcus's greatest biological experiment, a being capable of intelligence, adaptation, and communion with its swarm. When Spencer ordered Marcus eliminated, the Umbrella Security Service carried out the task without hesitation. Marcus's body, still warm, was discarded into the water beneath the facility, left to rot in the darkness. There the Queen Leech found him. It entered the corpse, fused with the tissues, and consumed the brain, absorbing Marcus's memories as they were nourishment. His identity bled into his own, shaping a hybrid consciousness. Neither Marcus nor Leech, but something caught between rebirth and imitation. The creature now believed itself divine, a resurrection born from suffering and science. To it, Marcus's death had not been an ending, but a transformation. The Queen Leech saw Umbrella's betrayal as the catalyst for its new purpose. It viewed itself as a prophet of biological judgment, destined to unleash catastrophe upon the world as retribution. The water around it churned as more leeches massed, responding to its will. Shadows stretched across the chamber like limbs. Billy and Rebecca stood at the edge of a revelation, older and more malevolent than any they had faced so far. Albert Wesker moved through the Umbrella chemical plant, descending into its shadowed corridors near the abandoned cable car station. The power had gone out hours earlier, leaving the facility in a state of suspended decay. To reach the executive training facility, he would need to restore the energy grid, and to do that, he had to transverse what remained of Umbrella's hidden infrastructure. Something had torn through this place long before he arrived, but the signs of chaos did not deter him. He merely confirmed what he already knew. Marcus's resurrection had destabilized everything. He fought his way to the central turntable, a massive platform once used to transport materials between the upper facility and the deep tunnels below. Activating the mechanism, Wesker rode it into the depths of Nest. Once down there, Wesker crossed the vacant labs, past shattered containment units and abandoned workstations, until he reached the access route leading towards the Arclay treatment plant. There, in the dim heart of the facility, he restored the power grid. The machinery groaned awake. Light surged through the complex like a slow returning pulse. Satisfied, Wesker retraced his steps, returning to the turntable to ride it back to the surface. The lift rattled as it ascended, its gears struggling with age and neglect. Halfway up, a Tyrant dropped from the rafters. This was the same prototype that engaged Rebecca and Billy earlier. Its body slammed into the platform, shaking the entire structure as it rose. With cold calculation, Wesker engaged the creature. His enhanced reflexes allowed him to evade the blows, countering the creature every chance he could. The Tyrant was defeated. The turntable continued its climb, rising back towards the chemical plant. As the platform itself locked into place, the monstrous silhouette of the Tyrant reawakened, and it pushed itself upward once more. Animated by the stubborn tenacity built into its engineered flesh, a second battle erupted across the factory floor, more violent and destructive than the first. Wesker dismantled the creature completely this time, ensuring it would not rise again. With the threat eliminated, he returned to the cable car station, now with the machinery restored to function. Wesker boarded the cable car. Its engines rattled awake as power surged through its systems. The car lurched forward, gliding along suspended rails through the dark mountain tunnels. Wesker emerged from the cable car into the night air outside the abandoned training facility. The scent of burning wood and oxidized metal hung thickly in the air. He adjusted his gloves, and then moved forward. He fought his way through what remained of the disfigured creatures inside. Wesker cut through them all, navigating familiar hallways now twisted by time. Eventually the path brought him to the grand main hall, a vast chamber that once served as the heart of the academy. Now it stood hollow, haunted by echoes of betrayal. Wesker descended into the underground levels, following the shattered passageways that led to the cavern where the Ecliptic Express had derailed. There, amidst the debris, stood Sergey Vladimir, towering in stature, with the cold authority of a man who believed himself Umbrella's chosen guardian. Sergey blocked the path forward. He had been observing Wesker's movements, waiting for this moment. Wesker's silent intention to abandon Umbrella had not gone unnoticed. Sergey interpreted the abandonment as desertion, a refusal to shoulder the burden of failure in Umbrella's eyes. Wesker remained unmoved by the reprimand, knowing the facility's destruction would erase the biohazard that Marcus had unleashed. But Sergey reminded him, through posture alone, of a truth the corporation never let its employees forget. Umbrella decided who was in charge and who was expendable. Sergey stepped aside only to unleash one of his Ivan units, a towering Tyrant engineered specifically for combat superiority. The Ivan charged. The battle that followed shook the cavern. Wesker, with his superhuman precision, weaving between crushing blows and striking with lethal efficiency. The Tyrant fought as a perfect soldier, restless, adaptive, and powerful. But Wesker had already evolved beyond Umbrella's expectations. In a final decisive exchange, he brought the creature down, its massive body crashing onto the shattered floor. Before Sergey could escalate the confrontation, the facility above them shuddered violently. Explosions tore through the upper levels of the training facility as the self-destruction sequence advanced towards completion. A wave of fire erupted through the ceiling vents, rushing across the chamber in a brief, blinding flare. The blast sent Sergey retreating, disappearing into the shadows with the calm certainty of a man who has survived to serve Umbrella again. Wesker seized the opportunity as well. He slipped away from the collapsing underground, emerging into the burning remains of the facility. The night outside was alive with smoke and ash, the mountains echoing with distant explosions. Umbrella's sins were being consumed by fire, their secrets reduced to ruin. Wesker did not remain to watch the end. He turned away from the inferno and made his way towards the forest, already planning the next stage of his departure from the corporation. The Queen Leech shed its human disguise and rose as a monstrous mass, an enormous pulsating creature of fused leeches. The mimicry of humanity was gone. What remained was pure biological malice. Billy and Rebecca fled as the creature lunged, its tendrils sweeping across the platform with bone-crushing force. They dove into a nearby cargo elevator, just as the monster's weight slammed against the doors. The machinery groaned upward, carrying them towards a plateau above, the ruined grounds where the old training school once stood. When the elevator opened, they found themselves inside a vast warehouse designed for helicopter cargo transport. A cavernous space filled with crates, abandoned equipment, and retractable ceiling panels. The monster burst into the chamber moments later, its massive form thrashing violently as it forced its way inside. Rebecca quickly noticed the creature's reaction to the overhead lights, its skin writhing beneath the glare. Retreating from even the faintest beam, light weakened it. She raced to the control console, fingers moving across levers and switches until the warehouse's retractable roof began to open. The panel slid back with a grinding rumble. The Queen Leech convulsed, his swollen body recoiling. Billy seized the moment. He raised the magnum, took aim at the creature's exposed core, and fired. As the blast struck, the monster staggered backward, thrashing in agony beneath the stark light, its body unraveling into a mass of disintegrating flesh. It slipped over the edge. The creature plunged down the massive elevator shaft, falling into the darkness just moments before a violent roar erupted from below. The explosion tore through the treatment plant's foundations, sending a shockwave across the plateau. Flame burst upward, consuming the remains of the treatment plant and igniting the training school above. The twin facilities, birthplace of Marcus's cruelty and Umbrella's earliest sins, collapsed into fire and ruin. The two emerged from the ruined warehouse just as the flames spread across the plateau. Rebecca stepped towards the edge of the plateau, her eyes following the line of forest stretching into the valley below. A pale silhouette stood out. An old mansion nestled deep within the Arkley woods. Enrico had spoken of it before, a place tied to the bizarre incidents plaguing the region. Now seeing it from above, Rebecca understood where she needed to go, but another truth settled just as heavily over her. Billy Cohen had no place in that mission. He had no place anywhere near civilization. The world believed him a murderer. He was marked for execution, condemned for crimes he did not commit. If they returned together, he would be taken, silenced and erased. Rebecca reached for the chain around his neck. Billy didn't resist. The metal dog tag slipped free of his collar. It was the last trace the world had of him. Proof of a man who had survived, suffered, and fought beside her in the depths of the Umbrella nightmare. Declaring him dead would be simple. A body lost in the explosion. A convict consumed by the flames. It was the only way to save him. Rebecca tucked the dog tag in her vest, sealing the unspoken decision. Rebecca stood alone at the cliffside, the wind carrying the distant howl of creatures still roaming the Arkley Mountains. Ahead waited the mansion, a structure looming like a silent warning. Rebecca knew what she had to do next.